Hello, everyone. My name is David Simmons-Wood. I'm the Programs Director for Early Music America, and I want to thank you for joining us on this Saturday for the next in our Winter-Spring webinar series. Today, we'll be talking recent studies in artistic research with Kathryn Cok, as well as Jeremy Bass, and we'll be hearing about some of their programs and some of their recent research in just a little bit. I want to remind you just of a few upcoming events that will be happening in just about a week and a half. We'll be hosting our first EPLC mixer with the Emerging Professional Leadership Council here at Early Music America. You can join us, and we'll have a registration for that. That'll be on our eNotes newsletter, will also be on the website. If you don't currently receive our weekly eNotes news from the Early Music community, you can go to our website, earlymusicamerica.org, and there's a sign up for eNotes button at the bottom. We'd also like to remind you that our summit is coming up in about 8 months from now in October, and we are currently accepting proposals for presentations to be held during that time. All of those proposals that are selected will receive an honorarium as well as free registration for the summit, and we're already receiving some wonderful proposals, and we encourage you to think about what you might share with the Early Music America community. And we've got some wonderful events, including concerts and workshops and networking opportunities and more that will be part of that summit as well. So you'll definitely want to attend. Registration for that will be opening up in June. So keep an eye out at earlymusicamerica.org to find out more about that upcoming summit. So I would like to welcome our guest, or one of our guests today, which is Kathryn Cok. Kathryn is a harpsichordist, fortepianist, artistic researcher at the Hague, the Royal Conservatoire of the Hague. She's head of master research since 2011. Kathryn has witnessed firsthand the exciting development of artistic research as a source of inspiration and discovery for young performers. In addition to helping students develop their own artistic identity, the focus on artistic research provides them with important skill sets which enable them to be successful in the ever-challenging world of historical performance and beyond. And this is a wonderful intersection kind of field, and we're really excited to hear more about this. So, Kathryn, thank you so much for being here. Welcome, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you so much for the invitation, and also to Early Music America for having me on tonight. Night for me. I'm in Europe at the moment. Yes, artistic research. Artistic research is for me not only something that we talk about in curriculum, but it's also a mentality and a life philosophy. In fact, it not only starts with young people in master programs and PhD programs, but it's also a source of lifelong learning for performers such as myself and other performers that I work with. So it's actually a mentality. You know, if someone would ask you at a party what you do for a living, you wouldn't say, I work as a musician. You'd say, I am a musician. And I firmly believe that artistic research is the same thing. You are an artistic researcher. It actually colors and creates an interest in everything that you're doing and makes you curious. So what defines an artistic researcher? I've put a list of a few different ideas that come to mind. Curiosity. Curiosity about why you play a particular instrument, why you use a particular bow, a tuning, a type of string, why you play a particular phrase that way. Is it something your teacher told you to do? Is it something you read about? Is it something that is inherent in your nature as a performer? Inquisitiveness, always wondering the how and why, and being, excited by new developments and new discoveries connected to historic performance practice in so many different facets. It can be instruments, it can be performance practice, it can be practicing, it can be musical cognition, it can be the art of interpretation. The drive to discover something new. This is something that is so important for all of us as human beings, to be constantly curious, but also discovering something new can lead to developments in your own career. So personal development is a very important aspect in second cycle degree programs, master programs, but also in a PhD program, and also the desire to carve out a niche for yourself. There are so many awesome performers out there. There are so many people who have something to say. So how do you carve out a niche for yourself to be able to continue to work as a performer, to be able to pass on the information that you discover about your instrument, about your voice, about your composition? How do you carve out a niche for yourself so that you're successful and that people want to listen to you? So when I started as a head of master research in 2011, there was actually not a program. There was really a desire from the Conservatoire here in The Hague to help students develop themselves, not to just produce more performers that were going to end up, miserable in a position that they didn't like years ago. But to really think about what young performers need, young students need. So, I started thinking about what is research actually? We think of musicology, but what is research for a performer? Well, here's a good quote. Research is finding out what you don't already know. So no one knows everything, but everybody knows something. If you're a performer, you know something about your instrument, you know the music you love, you know the venues you like to perform in. However, to complicate matters, often what you know or think you know is incorrect. It may be something that someone told you or something that you just assume. So incorrect meaning that you don't know where it comes from. You've never questioned it. So for me, research is organized learning and looking for specific things to add to your store of knowledge. Now, when I talk to my students in the first year of the master, they have an introduction to research in the arts course that they follow with me, where we investigate different aspects of doing research. And one of the first things I say is research should be something that adds to the body of knowledge, provides something for the outside world, but also provides something for you. And an image I like to use is a brick wall or a stone wall. If you're walking in, let's say, upstate New York, and you're walking in the forest, and maybe there was a settlement there, 200 years ago, and you stumble upon the remains of a beautiful stone wall, and you see someone's been there before. Someone laid a foundation for that wall, and there's some stones, and maybe you adjust one or put it back or look at the wall. Being an artistic researcher means even if the wall is ancient, the stones you add are contributing to the body of knowledge. So you need the wall to be there to start with, and then you add to that wall, and you can make, a 10-foot high wall, or you could add one layer. It doesn't matter, but you're contributing to something that's important to you as well as to others. When I was awarded my PhD in 2011, it was called practice-based research, along with some very well-known musical performers and thinkers about music, including a flute player, Jed Vance. We were the first generation of performers to go into not musicology, but into artistic research. At that time, it was called practice-based research. It was a really new idea. So the musical work, the creative activities of the performer were the starting point for the research. So they're considered both the research and the object of research itself. So artistic research is the debatable body of thought which offers an alternative to purely scientific methods in the search for truth. So the truth can be something that's important to you as a researcher. It can be something that's important to a small group of people that you work with, a small community. In my case, maybe harpsichord players or people who love to play basso continuo, but it can also be a truth for the wider world, the wider community, people who come to your concerts, people who listen to recordings, people who are curious about what you do. As I said, using that image of the wall, the accumulation of knowledge in the artistic field is a form of research. And artistic researchers, in particular, carry out research about the reality that surrounds them. Maybe you wonder what a bassoon reed looks like when it vibrates. Well, we had a student in The Hague who did a research specifically about that aspect. He wondered what would happen if he created a box in order to be able to film the vibration of a bassoon reed, to see what that means for him as a player, as a reed maker, and also for cane producers. So very specific and very small, but something that really meant a lot to him as a performer. So artistic researchers carry out research about the reality that surrounds them, their instruments of work, and the networks linking these. And artistic research means that the artist produces an artwork and researches the creative process, thus adding to the accumulation of knowledge. Now, this is actually a really important point and something that we talked about a lot in the beginning stages of developing the department. You know, if you learn a piece of music, if you prepare for a recital, if you come up with a new program that you try to sell to an audience, if you record a CD with music that you love, it's an enormous amount of work. There's a process that goes. There's a whole planning organization, all these aspects, but the audience in the end only sees the finished product. They hear the concert, they listen to the lecture, they listen to the CD, they read the booklet notes. And what artistic research does, it highlights that really interesting process that goes on. The moment of an idea that happens about a program or about a different way of playing. And then it maps the whole process until the end. And that's the part that we're really interested in. But it can be difficult to figure out how to map that process. Now, especially in the US, but also in the Netherlands, there's a very strong tradition of musicology. I could name numerous institutions in the US that are famous for their musicology programs. In addition to journals that are produced and books that are written. Same thing in the Netherlands. We didn't have anything artistic based. There was a feeling, an essence that performers perform and musicologists figure out the how and why. If you think about it, that's quite a strange way of thinking, especially with historical performance practice, because we are, in general, very curious people, looking to, to break down walls and to break boundaries and to create something new. So when I was preparing this PowerPoint, I thought to myself, what are a few general points that I could make that would sort of sketch the difference between artistic research and versus traditional musicology with no, judgment as to which is better. So in artistic research, the artist is central to the research. You could have two individuals carrying out the same research project, but the end result will be completely different. Just as you can have two students or two PhD researchers learning a piece of music and have a totally different interpretation. So the experience of the artist plays an important role in the research. From the first day of deciding what's going to be researched, to the design of the project, to the process, to how it's described, and even to the audience at the end. So who's going to read it? The artist may, in fact, also be part of the research experiment. So you can research how you learn a piece of music, how you perform in a certain way. So you become part of the project, and a very important part. And the results of an artistic research project should always have an impact on the artist, on the performance, on the way of thinking about music, on the way that the artist interacts with students, fellow performers, and the audience. Now, in traditional musicology, of course, which is very valuable because some amazing books have been written by musicologists, they often, or at least in the past, would approach the research topic as an analyzer and an observer from a distance. The personal experience of the researcher, the artistic input, was not relevant. And oftentimes, they never heard or played a single note. It was the score that was important. It was the history behind the score. It was the history of the performance practice. When I still lived in New York, I had several students from a well-known musicology department who were taking harpsichord lessons with me because they were required at the end of their PhD program to be able to play something. So there was no connection between their love of performing, their love of playing their instrument, and the investigation that they were undertaking. I recently gave a lecture in The Hague about artistic research, and a student from the Czech Republic, a harpsichord player who has visited our school several times for projects, raised his hand and he said, "Kathryn, what's the difference between artistic research and applied musicology?" I must say that was the first time that someone had asked me about applied musicology, and I had to think for a second. And the image that came to mind was sort of smearing peanut butter on a loaf of bread. So artistic research, the point of departure is a question. It's an issue. It's something that keeps the researcher awake at night. Why am I playing this way? What can I find out about this particular composer or this style? So it's directly related in a student situation to the artistic development and the inquisitiveness of the researcher. In applied musicology, which you could almost call musicology plus, discovered artistic results are applied to the artwork at the end of the research, maybe as an additional chapter, or as an artistic reflection, or a CD, or a performance. But in fact, the musicological result doesn't rely on this artistic material. So in fact, it's not essential and could be left out. In an artistic research program, the artistic development is the engine or driving force behind the project. This doesn't mean that it's only something that students should undertake. It can also be, a lifelong learning project for a researcher like myself, something that drives you to continue to question why you do things the way you do, or to discover new ways of communicating your artistic message with the audience. In applied musicology, the project is essentially musicological in nature with an added artistic element. So it's not intertwined. There's not a red thread that drives the researcher to look for results. Now, does this mean that the artistic research projects, particularly in my conservatoire, are far removed from musicology? No, in fact, we give our students the opportunity to document their research in two different ways. We give them an opportunity to create something called an exposition, which is a research paper, traditional research paper with bibliography, footnotes, chapters, but with the artistic message intertwined, using videos, using pictures, using compositions by the student. And we also give those students who are interested, in fact, in continuing on in a traditional musicological program, the option of writing a thesis, which we assess with more academic rigor, and the requirements are a little bit more, hard for the students. So they have to write in a different way. But still, the artistic element has to be present. Oh, my slides have moved around a little bit. I don't know why that is. Sorry about that. Looks a little bit alien. So, there are different types of research. And in traditional scientific research, there's often one methodology that's chosen as the tools for the job for completing the research project. The beauty of artistic research is it's possible to apply different methodologies at different times in the research journey. So you might do theoretical research as a background, as contextualization, painting the scene. Who's done research in this area before? What is known? Who can I contact to build my network? And what can I add? Exploratory research, discovering something about a particular performance practice or a way of performing. Experimental, descriptive, all these different aspects I like to think of them as tools that you would find in your toolbox. So when I talk to students about completing a project, often they'll say, gosh, I don't know what methodology to choose. And I always say, well, you're going to need the right tools for the job, but you may not be always using one tool the entire time that you are investigating your topic. So there is flexibility in breaking down the project into different sections. The beginning section, investigating why you're doing something. Then the section on how and what. And finally, thinking about how you're going to present it, which of course requires a whole level of different skills. So in my case, I'm head of master research, which is, as the name implies, a master research level artistic project. So what students have to do at our conservatoire, and this is something we've been working on for a while, and it's actually been really successful, not only in terms of results, but in terms of student satisfaction, is we sat down and we thought, okay, research is a great thing, research with an R. Some students find that a little bit scary. You know, if you've spent your whole life practicing really hard and you want to be strictly a performer, you may not even want to teach or write about what you're doing. So students had to complete research as part of the program. But as David said in his introduction, we live in an interesting world at the moment. There are a lot of performers out there. It's a tough world. You really need to be able to carve out a niche for yourself, and there should be a reason why people want to choose you for a project. So we thought, how can we find a way of connecting the research with the artistic development of the student? And the end result is helping them do a project outside of school, which we call professional preparation or professional integration activity. So it's actually something that I could describe as a triangle. Artistic development is at the top. That's the driving force behind why the student is at the school. He or she wants to play their instrument, sing, compose, produce. Research is the way to get there, and the end result is a project that takes them outside of school and shows them to the world. So we really think it's very important that these three aspects of completing the master are present. So, you know, students handle it in different ways. There are some students who have a larger research component to their master project. There are students who have a larger artistic component, and there are students who have an incredibly designed professional preparation activity, and the other two aspects, artistic development and research, may be slightly smaller. Of course, as educators, it doesn't matter what school you're in, what level you are teaching or directing, we are there for the students to help them become successful in whatever they choose to do. That maybe they would like to play in an orchestra, maybe have a chamber music ensemble, be a soloist, be a teacher, be a writer about music. So we ask students these three questions when they're embarking on their research project. How can you create a project? Choose a topic that will benefit you. It should be something that keeps you awake at night, something that makes you super excited. How can you achieve artistic professional goals using your project? Maybe it will lead you to creating a website or a concert series, or lead to a PhD program, or a CD, or a book. And how can the program help you develop multiple skill sets for the future? Let's face it, today's performing situation is very different than it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. Audiences are informed, and audiences love to hear the performer. I know myself, if I play a recital, if I did that 20 years ago, I would have written program notes, would have been in the booklet, and I would have said very little to the audience. But now I tend to talk in between pieces and sometimes engage in conversations with audience members during the concert. And that's a beautiful thing. It's twofold. It enables the audience to better get to know the performer, and it creates a dialogue and an interest. And in the end, probably will lead more audience members to come back to another performance. So we also ask our students who their project is for, obviously for themselves, but for which audience? A big one? A small one? Is there one? How do you find them? And especially, what do you want to tell them? So if someone goes to an artistic research lecture, what are they going to remember when they go home? When they're sitting on the dinner table with their family, what three big ideas are they going to be able to tell about the person? So who do you want to reach? Again, in my example, would I want to reach a small group of harpsichord players, fortepianists, or the larger musical community, or the world at large? That means that the scope and the description of your topic need to be decided so that you know who you would like to reach. So who are you targeting with your artistic research? And most importantly, in our master program, what's in it for you? Where is it going to take you? For instance, will it take you to a library in another country where you will be given the opportunity to look at incredible manuscripts? Will it help you broaden your network? In The Hague, our students have a research supervisor to help them with their project, but we also give them the possibility of having an external supervisor. Maybe they want to go back home. We have a very large international student body. So for example, maybe you have a student from the Czech Republic who would like to go back to the Czech Republic after he or she has studied So is there someone back at home who knows something about their topic that they can involve in their network and therefore create a space, create room to return home and have a position? Is there someone in their network that they can learn from? So what's in it for them? How can they create opportunity by doing a project? And this is just a silly Venn diagram that I share with students that I think is very, very true, not only for students, but also for all of us in the artistic world. So things you like to do. For me, I love to make music on historical keyboard instruments, things I'm good at. I think I'm also good at it. I've been doing it for a very long time. And sometimes the connection with the last circle on the bottom, things that make money, that takes a little bit more effort. And the idea with an artistic research project is students develop the skill sets to be able to communicate about their project, maybe to write a funding application or to submit a program proposal, for instance, for Boston in 2023. So it gives them a way to put words to something that is essentially wordless. So, you know, when you're performing a piece of music, you know yourself inherently as an artist what you want to say. But how do you talk about that away from your instrument? How do you convince people to listen to you and to give you a chance? So very briefly, my story, I studied in the US and then I studied in the Netherlands. And I must say I was always very, very curious about what I was doing. I was fortunate to have teachers that provided me with a lot of reading material. I was very interested in basso continuo. I was given the opportunity during my master's to create a library catalog of music from the University of Leiden Library, which is our sort of Oxbridge here in the Netherlands. And while I was looking at all these amazing historical sources, I started discovering basso continuo figures in Dutch songbooks, which of course piqued my curiosity and led me to reading much more about 17th and 18th century musical history. I have no Dutch blood in me at all, even though my last name looks a little bit like that. It's from Southern Europe, not from this part of the world. So I got really curious about where I was living and how the musical style of the Dutch Republic was, and discovered there was very little written about it. It was one of these moments, okay, what's in it for me? Well, I can learn more. I can learn more about the music that I play, learn more about where I live. And it helped me think of my place as a musical performer. And it brought me to music that I had never thought to play before. So briefly, because of course you all want to hear about our students, because I have 3 examples of alumni, 2 recent artistic research experiences that demonstrate this whole idea of lifelong learning. I mean, my dissertation I finished in 2011, but a few years ago, I was at a Historical Keyboard Society of North America conference. I had just given a talk about the Italian influence in Dutch music. And I was sitting listening to a beautiful recital of a colleague. And I suddenly thought that I recognized the piece that she was playing, but she said it was by an Italian composer. And I had the same piece of music in my bag by a Dutch composer. And I thought, that's very odd. So I started investigating this idea, and 2 main characters turned up. Jacob Willem Lustig, who was an organist in Groningen in the Netherlands, and Lodovico Giustini, who you may know as the writer of the very first sonatas for fortepiano. So the sonatas that I knew by Lustig were published in 1734. There's a beautiful original edition. There's a modern edition. I regularly play these students as part of this repertoire as part of my recitals. I know a lot about Lustig. He was a great organist. He was 60 years organist in Groningen in a beautiful church there, Martinikerk. Ludovico Giustini published the very first collection of sonatas for the new instrument, the fortepiano. There's a lot written about him. Modern pianists often record his music, but in the early music world, he's not so discussed, although there are some recent articles that have come out with history about him to show you how interesting it is. So here are 2 examples of a very similar piece. The one on the left is by Lustig for harpsichord. The one on the right is for fortepiano by Giustini. And if you look very closely, I think it's very obvious that someone was very naughty. So my investigation is continuing. I'm writing an article now, and it's about plagiarism, it's about musical style, and it's fascinating. That's a lifelong learning project. It's something I started a couple years ago. I've given a few talks about it, and an article is in the works. Another artistic research question that came up recently that I found a wonderful question is someone asked me to write an article for the Svelink year, which of course was in 2021. 1621 is a Svelink year. They asked me to write an article and give a lecture on the fingering found in manuscript sources for Svelink, but not as a musicologist, but as a performer. And that resulted in articles in English and Dutch, concerts, lectures, and makes me think completely different about how I use early fingering in the music of Svelink. And it enables me to have incredibly interesting discussions with students about what I found. Does it mean that there's a right way to play Svelink's music and that I have to use the fingering found in the sources? No, but it makes me think about what I'm doing. Is it automatic pilot? Is it something that I carry over from my elementary school piano days? Or is it something that I really think about, and can it impact my artistic performance? So 2 projects that I've done recently. The Lustig Giustini project is still in the works. Eloquent Fingers has been published. And it's just so fascinating to be able to go deeper in the repertoire that you play and to just constantly question what you do and how you can pass on that musical message. Now, here's the best part. There are two more sections to my presentation tonight. I'd like to present 3 alumni, North American alumni, particularly proud of these 3. And then the last 10 minutes of the presentation today will be given by a current M2 student, Jeremy, and I will introduce him in a little bit later. So what I did, the question was if I would be able to highlight how North American students have participated in the program in The Hague. So I asked their permission first, and they all said, oh, how nice to hear from you. Great, sure, you can present my project. And then I asked them what they're doing now. And I had some very interesting responses. So I'm just going to read. This is Edmonton-born singer Jacob Grammett. He investigated the music of Johann Rudolf Alle. He made editorial and performance issues surrounding this particular source. And he writes, having always been drawn to German music of the 17th century, I found a collection of music from Alle that was largely unknown and unperformed. This enabled me to start from nothing when creating an edition and researching his life and music, meaning I could see what effect the process would have on my performance. By doing detailed research into a specific collection, looking at both his compositional style and his use of pre-existing text and music, I discovered Alle's seeming fascination with personal spirituality, leading to new ideas for the performance of his music. Now, I was Jacob's supervisor, and I knew he did a fantastic job. He produced a website with all kinds of information, but I was curious if this opportunity to do artistic research had brought him anywhere. And he's back living in Canada, and he says, the experience of researching into context and editing of historic music certainly helped, as together with Cree composer Andrew Balfour, the ensemble I work with developed, recorded, and will be touring the Nagamo project, which is it connects Canadian and Indigenous peoples, and it's a wonderful project. He's now the artistic manager of Musica Intima, a professional and fully collaborative vocal ensemble based in Vancouver, and he's researching and creating new projects that cross boundaries. So he's dealing with Indigenous populations and very much investigating his role as a Canadian performer. Super interesting. Christina, New York-born harpsichordist Christina Kwon. So this is actually a photo of the front of her exposition, as we call it. So it's sort of the cover of a book, but online. So you can navigate by clicking on different aspects. And this shows her final research lecture that she gave on the right. And there's a picture of her playing from tablature. I asked Christina to describe her research to us, and this is what she wrote to me. As a harpsichordist and hip performer, I was so fascinated with 16th century keyboard tablature notation on my first encounter some years ago. Since then, I have been inspired to explore playing from original notation as part of my hip training. This research is a big part of this artistic endeavor. addressing 16th century keyboard tablature notation from Spanish and German sources and finding answers for what it is, why it was invented, why it is not in practice today, and how one may bring it back to practice. At the beginning stages of this exploration, I noticed that keyboard tablature was not really in practice as performance notation in the current hip dialogue. I wanted to investigate why, and through this thesis, present it as a relevant, stimulating topic. This research presents historical and theoretical analysis of this notation and the results of an extensive systematic experiment survey I devised and conducted with 32 non-musicians and musicians of all levels. And just a short aside, my 12-year-old son participated, and she taught him how to play keyboard tablature in 10 minutes. I have video proof. Personally, the contents of this thesis have greatly deepened my understanding of historical performance and keyboard music in the 16th century and enriched my experience as an early music performer. And the last example from an alumni, this is actually from 2015, so quite at the beginning of the development of our department, but very interesting. I hope you can read it. It's quite small. This is California native violone player Shanti Nachtegaal. So she has a Dutch last name, but she's American. Oh, what's interesting, this picture was taken at a European Platform for Artistic Research conference that took place in 2015. I often have the opportunity of taking students with me when I go to conferences, and the conference took place in the home of musicologist Nicolas Arnoncourt. So this was probably someone's bedroom when the family still lived in this small castle. So the title of her research is The Examination of Mid-19th Century Double Bass Playing, based on these sources that you can read here. To save time, I won't read the whole slide. And she had questions such as, should historical double bass techniques be incorporated into historically informed performance practices today? And how can historical techniques be used to enhance modern performances? Now, when I asked Shanti what she was doing, I knew a little bit what she would answer, but she gave me a lot of information. She said, my Con project made me decide I want to be a scholar performer and pursue further studies in music research. I won the International Society of Bassists Research Competition and the STIMU, which is Utrecht's Early Music Festival Conference Symposium Young Scholar Award with my project, which made me believe that this could be the right path for me. After the Royal Conservatoire, I did a master's in music theory and history at Penn State University, and now I'm working on my PhD in musicology at McGill University. My MA thesis at Penn State expanded on parts of my Royal Conservatoire project, so there is a direct connection there. Now for my PhD at McGill, I'm still incorporating practice-based research into my dissertation, along with more traditional musicology. And now, to end, I thought it would be nice. I've been doing a lot of talking. You've been looking at a lot of slides and a lot of text. Shanti included a really interesting video as an example. She was exploring two different ways of fingering on the double bass, playing a well-known excerpt. And I'd love to play it for you. I don't know if David, do you have to do that or can I do that? Oh, there we go. So it's a fun video, but it really shows how the discoveries about fingering impacted her performance as a researcher. And I like to show this video because it's fun, and it also really clearly highlights not only the creativity of students, but also the artistic results. So that's it for me for now. And I would like to introduce the next speaker tonight, who is a second-year master student at the Royal Conservatoire in The Hague, Jeremy Bass. And I know Jeremy a little bit better than maybe most of the students, because he's in my master circle. We provide an opportunity for our first-year and second-year students to discuss their research together. And as a master circle leader, I'm there to lead the discussion and ask questions. We meet 10 times a year for 2 hours. Our meeting is always on Tuesday morning at 9, which can be hard for some to get there on time, but 9 to 11. And it's an opportunity for students to talk amongst themselves. We find that first-year master's students and second-year master's students can help each other in very different ways at different points in time in their research. So I'm very happy to welcome Jeremy, and he's going to tell you about his research project, which he is currently rounding off. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Kathryn. Thank you also to David for helping facilitate this. And of course, thank you to Early Music America. I'm going to quickly introduce my topic and the motivations for choosing it that I had, and I'm going to leave out a lot of information about the topic itself. So, of course, if you're more interested, if you find this interesting, please feel free to contact me and get in touch, and I'm happy to talk more to you about the details of this project. So my project was looking at the lute continuo parts in a collection of pieces called the Royal Consort by the English composer William Laws. Kathryn mentioned earlier that some of us have had the chance to go to some of the wonderful libraries in this part of the world and examine some manuscripts up close. And in fact, I am one of those people. So part of my research involved going to the Bodleian Library in Oxford and actually examining autograph manuscripts of the Royal Consort up close. And I should explain just about the background image of this title page here. This is a detail from a painting by Andrea Mantegna that, of course, predates William Laws by a couple centuries. But this was purchased and displayed by William Laws's patron, Charles I. So this is a painting that Laws might have seen during his career at the royal court. This is a photograph that I took of the first page of one of the autograph manuscripts of the Royal Consort. In spite of spending a lot of time in libraries over the course of my life, I had actually never been, prior to just recently, I'd never been to a library for the express purposes of looking at early manuscripts. And this is something that I think the first generation of early music performers during the sort of early music revival of the 60s and 70s and so on, a lot of times you had to go to the library to find new music to play. This often meant like digging around, really getting your hands dirty in archives and looking through piles of old books. But these days, sort of my generation of early music performers, we oftentimes just go to IMSLP and download whatever we need and print it off or just read it straight off a tablet. But this is going to actually see a manuscript in a library is a really unique experience. That you pick up these objects. I mean, they just let me hold these these beautiful books that are leather bound, and they have all these sort of smells of like natural materials, of leather and wool and so on, and ink kind of glitters, and so you really had the sense that people thought about writing down music and copying out music in a really different way. And I think by implication, probably the whole experience of making music was really different back then. So I think that was a really valuable experience. as part of this this artistic research project. And I should mention that also, I was given very generously a grant to help facilitate my my travel to Oxford, which was something that I applied for as part of one of my classes here in the first year of my master's. And yeah, so these were the motivations that I had for choosing this topic. I play lute and theorbo. I come from a classical guitar background, but one thing that I wanted to do when I started playing lute and theorbo was to play with other musicians, and that meant playing basso continuo. So this was really, in coming to do the masters here, I really wanted to improve as a continuo player. And of course, the Royal Consort has parts for two theorbos. And so, I think this was really a primary motivation for my choosing these pieces to study. Also, the early Baroque era in England is a little bit esoteric. We, particularly as lutenists, we know a lot about the so-called golden age of English Renaissance lute music, which I associate principally with John Dowland, who wrote a really extraordinary amount of exceptional music for the Renaissance lute, and then of course we also often think about Purcell, and then later on Handel, which are like high and late Baroque respectively, but kind of this so-called Caroline era of music, the music that was made during the court of Charles I and so on. I mean, this is a little bit of a gray area in music studies, and so this made this a really intriguing topic for me. And of course, England is also close by. I mean, you just have to get on the Eurostar in Rotterdam or in Brussels and go under the English Channel, and then you're in London. And yeah, I took a lovely train to Oxford, and suddenly there I was at the front door of the Bodleian Library. So my research questions was very basic. How did the two lutenists realize the continuo parts in the Royal Consort? This is a little bit of information about William Laws. I mean, you can look him up on the internet after this, so we don't need to spend a lot of time here. But these are two possible images of Laws, although neither one is confirmed. Yeah, here you have Laws on the left there as a young man, and on the right there as an older man who this would have been shortly before his death, when he was actually shot to death in the English Civil War. And of course, the English Civil War is also another complicating factor in researching the music of this time. So lots of material was lost and so forth. This is a little bit about the Royal Consort. So it was composed probably throughout the 1630s. It's a large collection of instrumental music that was very influential to succeeding generations of composers, especially people like Matthew Locke and also Henry Purcell. It was not published during William Laws's lifetime. Laws was part of this very exclusive and private group of musicians that surrounded Charles I, and of course they didn't want to let their music out to the wider world, and so these pieces are really kind of cloaked in mystery in some ways. Also, interestingly about the Royal Consort, there are two different versions. One is in this sort of older viol consort instrumentation, and the second one is, as you can see, it has two violins in the treble parts, and then two bass viols and two theorbos, which is a really interesting scoring. So you have this, plucked continuo that's providing the foundation for the ensemble, two bass viols, which are doing all sorts of divisions over that, but also playing the bass line. And then these two violins, which are sort of like a precursor of the high Baroque trio sonata. And so that's kind of an innovative aspect of this music. Yeah, so my research methodology, of course, main thing was to play the music. I mean, this is music that really doesn't get played very much. And so I will show you a very brief video of us performing some of this music. I had the opportunity to do that last year, a little bit this year as well. And I will have some on my final exam and on my professional integration activity that Kathryn was describing earlier. I was also trying to track down the instruments that were used to play the continuo parts. Laws calls them theorbos, but in fact they're not the kind of standard Italian theorbo that we think of today. They were somewhere kind of halfway between the Renaissance lute and this large Italian theorbo with the very long neck that you see in your typical Baroque ensemble. These instruments are very rare today. They were actually really structurally unsound, the way that this neck extension was done on these early theorbos, and so a lot of them fell apart or were converted into other instruments later on. And then kind of, modern reproductions, there are some of them floating around, but they're pretty hard to come by. So yeah, anyway, that was an interesting and complicated aspect of my research, trying to hunt for these instruments. And I'll show you a picture of me playing a similar instrument in just a second here. And then, of course, another goal of my research was to really go back to the sources, as I explained earlier. One extremely valuable source, and one that I recommend highly you read, is Music's Monument by Thomas Mace, which was published in the 1670s. And he has a whole chapter, which, as you can see here, concerns the theorbo. And he goes through all sorts of a detailed description of the instrument and how to play it. He gives a bunch of examples for. He talks about breaking the parts, or arpeggiating the chords of the continuo part, which seems to have been something that was really characteristic of English continuo playing at the time. So anyway, this is something that I've been looking into also during the course of my research. And then I also, in Oxford, I had the chance to look at a manuscript by a colleague and probably close friend of William Law's, John Wilson. John Wilson left this large collection of songs. And as you can see here, he writes, of course, the song on top there in treble clef. And then you have this continuo line in the middle here, which is completely unfigured. And so this was something that was very common in England at the time, was to read off of an unfigured bass. And so you're really going on very little information when you try to realize a continuo part in this music. Oftentimes, figured bass notation was known in England at this time. It just wasn't very common, particularly amongst professional musicians who could really just, they'd really internalize the rule of the octave, and they could really just play off of a bass line, or probably even by ear. Maybe they wouldn't even need the bass line if they knew the tune. But Wilson actually went through the trouble of notating a realization in lute tablature, which you can see. It might be a little bit small on your screen there, but you can see he went through and notated some of the harmonies, and also filling in a little bit of the texture around the larger note values. And Wilson was also known for experimenting, like William Law is known for experimenting with dissonance and really kind of going outside of the boundaries of convention. So, so a continuo part by William Laws might have looked similar to this, I think. Okay, so yeah, I'm probably running a little bit short on time, so um, I'm just going to conclude real quick here. This was a visit that I made to an American lutenist who lives in Germany near Bremen, and he happens to have an instrument that's similar to William Laws's theorbo, and I asked him I asked him if I could try out the instrument, and then I asked if he would take a picture, and he also made a couple of short videos of me playing it. But as you can see, it looks a little bit different from a sort of standard Italian theorbo. You have these multiple nuts that are kind of set up along the neck extension there, and they each have a little pair of tuners behind each nut. So it's a really kind of unique looking instrument. And this is an instrument that had a slightly higher range than an Italian theorbo, so it allows you to do more sort of melodic division playing, and maybe breaking up the chords a little bit more than you would be able to with the Italian theorbo, which has this the top two strings are actually lowered by an octave, and the English theorbo, only the top string is down the octave. So yeah, this was quite a revelation to play this instrument. And finally, I will show you a brief video of a performance that I did of the Royal Consort with some colleagues of mine here. I think I can select this, or perhaps David has to select it for me. Yes, David is selecting it for me. Here you go. This is from the Royal Consort. I think we can leave it there. And as you can see in that video, we kind of had to split the difference between a Renaissance lute, which I'm playing, and an Italian theorbo that Kathryn was playing. So she was often taking care of those lower bass notes that I couldn't do, and I was filling in some of the higher pitched notes. So yeah, and you know, that was, I think, one of the main conclusions of my research was that, you know, in spite of really having a difficult time tracking down the proper types of lutes to use for this music, you know, it's worth playing with whatever you have, and oftentimes, you know, you can kind of improvise with the instrumentation, change things around when you don't have the kind of ideal you know, instruments that you want. And I think also there's a little bit of that in this. You know, the fact that this Law's collection also exists in these two separate instrumentations, meaning that, like, you know, people were playing them on viols or violins or you know, whatever sorts of melody instruments they had available. So yeah, I think that concludes my my talk. So thank you very much, and look forward to your questions if you have any.
Yes, thank you both, Jeremy and Kathryn. And we do have just a couple of minutes here if there are any questions. But I would just say, from the standpoint of someone who gets to interact with a lot of ENA members, this intersection of artists and research is at the core of what many of our members and those who engage with our programming are very, very much interested in. And I love, Jeremy, that point that you said at the end, that, you know, the ideal situation is you can try to find something that is the right instrument, but what do we do? And to see that there's evidence, right, that things that those considerations were still being made even at the time that the music was being composed. So when something wasn't one way, they just changed another way. And so I think there's many aspects that can help sort of comfort us in this period as we struggle to see to bridge that line between what's available and what's practical and what allows us to perform this. So I think it's a great example for this. I'm not seeing any questions right now. I do want to just take a moment and say that for anyone who's watching, especially of the, well, we'll get that in just a second. Here's a quick question. Let's get to this. What would be your advice to those just taking the leap into this type of research?
Well, if I can jump in, hi, Dom. Dom is also one of our alumni, so that alumnus of the ConCon, so it's nice to hear from you. Yeah, I think the question you need to ask yourself is why you want to do the project. It should be something that is something that keeps you awake at night, and something that I always tell students the very first lesson that they need to Google their topic. I know that's a little bit of an old-fashioned thing, but look online, see who's done something already, see if there are any gaps, see if there's a network that you can create also for yourself as a performer. So yeah, I would say any topic is a go, but do your background research before undertaking things, because we've had, as Jeremy knows, we've had situations, we have someone in our master circle who worked for a year and a half really hard on his research and then discovered that the question that he asked was not possible to answer. And he had to completely do a 360 and 180, I should say, and change his focus. So yeah, do your background research, but it should be something that keeps you awake at night and you find really fascinating.
And yeah, I would also echo that. And, this was actually the third topic that I proposed, this William Laws thing. And so, but ultimately I chose it because I really like the music. I mean, I know that sounds sort of simplistic, but and I thought it was a great opportunity to play continuo in the context of some music that I really wanted to play. So that's why I chose it. And it's also not something that's very well known about it. It has been researched about, and there is stuff written about it, but it's still sort of it's a little bit of a gray area, as I said before. So
wonderful. Thank you both for sharing your experiences, your research, and helping us to think about these in a different way. We also want to make sure that everyone understands that this is the kind of research that's perfect for our upcoming summit. Our connections this year, our theme is making connections this year, and making those kinds of connections between research and performance and all of the different aspects of what makes up this historical performance community is something that we're absolutely trying to provide a platform for, and we encourage you to apply. Our submission deadline is still a little bit away, April the 3rd, but we definitely recommend that if you have similar research, apply. And we'll be looking at those and making decisions in April. Similarly, if you're interested in this kind of research and perhaps doing this outside of the United States, we have a couple of our scholarships that are biennial scholarships that are coming to the application deadline. The Tindemans Early String Scholarship, which allows for advanced study of early bowed strings outside of North America. That's a $25,000 scholarship to fund a year, or up to $25,000 scholarship. We also have the 2023 Thornton Memorial Scholarship, which is for study of medieval music in Europe, which is a $4,000 scholarship. And these are great opportunities to kind of further and to be around a lot of scholars and performers who are doing this kind of artistic research. And so we definitely recommend that if you're interested in pursuing this, perhaps in the program at the Hague or elsewhere, to consider applying for one of these scholarships. These scholarships are biennial scholarships, so they won't be available again until 2025. So if you're interested, do take a moment to apply. So for the last time, I'll just say thank you so much, Jeremy and Kathryn, for joining us. This video will be archived on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So if anyone would like to review this again, or share it with your friends, you can make sure to do so. You can find out about our upcoming webinars at earlymusicamerica.org, and we'll have our upcoming EPLC mixer with members of the Early Music America Emerging Professionals Leadership Council. That's coming up in just a couple of weeks on Sunday, February the 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and you can engage with other artists, performers, and researchers at that mixer. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you and seeing you again in the future.
Thanks for having us.